Okay, everybody, I think we are just about ready to go ahead and get started. It is 2 p.m. on Thursday, July 10th, and we are again back to our GOEC webinar series. I hope that everybody really enjoyed and were able to attend the Ready Kids Conference last month. I know I had a great time there seeing everybody out and about. And as always, if you guys have any questions, please make sure to fill it out there on the chat box area, but we will have everybody muted throughout the entirety of the presentation. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Today, our presenter is going to be Rick Hulefeld, the founder and executive director of Children's Inc. in Northern Kentucky. And I know Rick as the chair of the Early Childhood Advisory Council, so I have the opportunity to talk to him pretty regularly about different things that the CECCs are doing, and I know he is very appreciative of all the hard work that you guys do on the ground. And he's going to talk to us today about 6 low-cost, no-cost ways to ensure that all children enter kindergarten ready. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Rick, and if you have any questions, please go ahead and type it there in the chat box, and we'll get to it as we can. Rick?
Okay, so what do I hit? Okay, good afternoon. This is Rick Hulefeld, and I want to thank you for taking some time out on what is, I hope, where you are, a beautiful afternoon. What I would hope is if this short webinar is successful, that you will see both things that you already knew and a few new things that would help families in your area be more effective in rearing their children. But my main hope is that you would be more committed to pulling your teams, the community early childhood councils, together and asking them to refocus again on the importance of helping our families be as effective as they possibly can. What we know about working with families is that even a few differences, even a few things that they do well again and again and again can have a huge impact on the child's development. I want to take about seconds to talk a little bit about my experience so that you would know that that this is not theory on my part, but it is actually our experiences. My organization, Children Inc., I founded 35 years ago. We serve approximately maybe 600 or 700 families, various early childhood centers, all of which are either 3-star or 4-star. And we also work with first-time high-risk moms. We do home visitation. We work with about 200 first-time high-risk, normally poor, normally young, normally moms who have very little support and who are pregnant for the first time. And, of course, we do a lot of advocacy. So what we're going to share with you today is just something theoretical, but it's something that we use, we know works, we know makes a difference. So here's the first thing. Now, many of you know about the brain research. And so I'm hoping that you have seen this before. What I'd like to sort of say is this is something that could have a huge impact for staff and for the families. If we're going to ask families to get more deeply involved in the rearing of their children, we have to provide them not only information, but information that is motivational. Early brain research is extraordinarily motivational. When you look at this slide, what you see is what only about 40 people knew in 1994. Most of us thought that some children were born smart, some children weren't, luck of the draw. What you see there says, okay, every child going home from the hospital has about 50 trillion synaptic connections. Until their adult age, roughly around 18 to 20, they will have twice as many synaptic connections as the adult has. Now, once you understand then that we human beings are unique among all of God's creatures, that in effect, we are the only creatures for whom most of the brain is built after birth, then you understand why it's important that we partner with parents, and you can understand the following pieces. So what I'm hoping is you'll take a look at this and you'll start to say, how do I share that with all of our staff? How do we share that with all families again and again and again? So the first thing we now know is that it's experience expectant, okay? That's a lot of big words for simply saying different parts of the brain develop at different times. Why that matters is that the part of the brain that builds language develops between roughly 6 months and about 52 months, or roughly between half a year and roughly 4.5. That's critical because all of school is based upon language. If we want a child to be successful, we have to be able to sort of say, okay, we're going to build an enriched part of that. And so now the second piece is it depends upon the experiences that we give the child. So if we wanted a child to be a reader, say, by the end of 3rd grade, or if we wanted a child to be really ready, what kinds of experiences would we be giving a child between the ages of 6 months and, it's not precise, 42, 48 months? What are those experiences that help a child build additional synaptic connections in that part of the brain that learns language, which is essential for school success? What do we know? How would we do that? What are some simple things that we could share with parents that would help them build that connection? Now remember, we've all said to parents, look, you are the child's first and best teacher. But we never really got much more explicit than that. Now we're able to say, wow, if you talk to your child, read to your child, listen to your child, ask questions, you're literally building in that moment millions and millions of synaptic connections. I believe that that kind of information becomes then motivational for a parent to sort of say, okay, I know I'm supposed to read to my kid, but wow, I can help build the brain that my child's going to carry for the rest of their life. I can help them become successful in school. I'm giving them an experience that literally is changing their future. That's something that we've never been able to say before, and therefore, I think it's really, really important. The third thing we would like families to know about the brain development is that it's use dependent, and that means it's kind of use it or lose it. So if a child doesn't build many connections in the first years of life in that part of the brain that uses language, over time the brain will start to say, look, I'm going to cut away what you're not really using very well. So between the ages of 10 and roughly 18, the brain disconnects 500 trillion synaptic connections. So what I'd like you to be able to do is to show parents and staff this slide. This slide started to change the entire early childhood world. This is why at the Ready Fest that the governor spoke, the Secretary of Education spoke, a leader from the Kentucky Senate spoke, a leader from Kentucky's House spoke. They all know what this slide is showing. This is an actual slide of the same part of the brain, and all of a sudden you can say, okay, this is not somebody's theory about how the brain develops. We can show you this. This slide kind of tells a story that's really, really powerful. Now, I've said I would hope that as leaders in your CECCs, all of your staff would know about these last 3 slides. Well, why would it be important for staff to know about it? Well, if I were a staff person and I saw these slides and I saw, okay, that's where the child is at birth and here's where they are at 6 years of age, I would, by definition, vis-a-vis every child that I was caring for, always be hopeful and optimistic and using lots of words and being very supportive, because the child in front of me is not done. He's a work in progress. This is a very powerful thing, and it also then says that I am extremely important in the life of that child, because many of those connections don't happen unless I'm really good with this child. I'm using a lot of words. I'm reading to this child. I'm listening to this child's questions even when I'm tired. It's important that staff see this. And then the last reason it's important for staff to see it is because it makes partnering with families essential. We will no longer be able to define loving children without including in that love of children respect for parents. We have to see that we and the parents together build what's in that middle slide. And when we don't partner, we don't build. And so we will come to a time in understanding our profession when we will basically say, when we say we love children, as many, many early childhood teachers do, we will mean we also respect all of the parents. We will look for their strengths. We will work with them. And we will respect all, not just some, all parents, because we cannot get to that middle slide without them. It's absolutely essential. So why would we want parents to see it? Because basically many of our parents that we most need to reach are overwhelmed, weary, tired, and now we're asking them to play a more important role in their child's development. Where does that motivation come from? How do we help them sort of see that if they don't do it, then something never happens for their child? It is a powerful visual. We need to be able to sort of say, hey, together we can do something extraordinary. Parents are weary. Many of the parents that we work with are discouraged. They don't feel like they make much of a difference. They don't even know why they're really that essential. This slide says, hey, not just you're the first and best teacher. This slide says, in effect, wow, it isn't going to happen without you. So here's the takeaway. Please share the brain slide to everyone who works with adults. And I think it's time for us to say that our own staff needs to see this too, because many of even our best early childhood staff get discouraged. They get weary. They kind of sort of feel like, wow, what differences am I making? We have got to be able to show them this slide and say, look, you can do what no other teacher in this child's life will ever be able to. No college professor will ever be able to walk out of a college classroom and say, today I helped build, maybe 100 billion synaptic connections. But we can say that, and we can say that every day. So we have to think about, as a community early childhood council, how do we get this message out again and again to all of the staff who work with young children? How do we get it out again and again to parents? Remember, for something to become part of what we really understand, we can't just show it once and say, okay, now they know it. We're asking them to see something in a totally new way. One of the ways you might be able to do that is this way. You can buy the Oregon Brain series, and then once you buy one copy of it, you have permission to reproduce it until you've gotten it to every family. It's a very simple way to kind of help parents and staff understand about the brain development. So this is one very low-cost way that you can do it. The no-cost way, take the first 3 or 4 slides that we presented and that will sit on this website, and just make sure that again and again and again we've shared that with our families and with our staff. Highly motivational, and frankly, it changes the lives of children. I have to tell you that I am deeply concerned about the fact that the professional and upper middle class families have already sort of understood what this early brain research is saying. That's not the bad news, except that it creates a growing gap between their children and all of the other children, the children in the middle class and the children in the lower socioeconomic class. There's a huge gap growing now between the families that have heard this brain research and are using it and the families who are not using it. And that's problematic for us. I believe that we have a moral obligation to get this information to every parent again and again so that they understand how utterly important they are. Okay, you've seen the school readiness definition. You say to yourself, okay, why is that new? What's so cool about that? Why is that important? The question is, how are you using it? What is really amazing here is that this is the first time that schools in the early childhood field are all on the same page. We're all saying now, here's a common definition for what it means for a child to be ready. So the question is, how do we share this with families? You've seen it. You have it. Hopefully you've already given it out to parents, but as all of us know, giving something out once to parents all at one time is probably not a most effective way to reach families. So what's the best practices? How are we sharing this? Do pieces of it go out in our monthly newsletters that many of us write to our families every month? Are pieces of it out in our centers? Do we have our staff in their frequent talking to families, talking about pieces of this? How we use this really, really matters. And it's kind of like one more time where something simple makes a huge difference. Having wonderful relationships with parents isn't necessarily an expensive thing. It isn't necessarily doing big things. It's doing the little things really, really well. So do you know the best ways that this definition is being used in various settings? Like, how is Head Start using this? How are the public preschools using this? Who's doing something different? How do we learn from each other? Getting this into the hands of parents again and again and again, and not just preschool parents. School readiness begins at birth. And it's so, how do we have that? How do we get it to parents in a way that is useful to them? Here's another low-cost, no-cost strategy. You may say, well, okay, we get the messages from the governor's office. That's cool. So the question is, how widely are these disseminated in your county? When was the last time, for example, all the partners that sit on your community early childhood council said to one another, okay, when you send the monthly meeting, when the governor's office sends this out to you and we all get this message, how broad is our dissemination to all of the families in our county? Are there families that we're missing? How do we reach them? So we're all concerned about the families who are not using licensed child care, Head Start, public preschool. This would be a no-cost way to sort of say, how do we get it to all of the other families? But this would require a conversation. Your members would have to say, okay, here's who I get it out to, who do you get it out to? So, for example, Children Inc. has a monthly newsletter that goes out to our friends. It goes out to about 3,000 friends and families that we have served and are part of our sort of network. What is everybody else's network in our county? How broadly and where are the gaps? So those are conversations that would have to take place. So this is sort of a screenshot of this, but Again, asking the question again and again, how are we getting this out and to whom are we getting it out would be really, really important. Here's another one that we all know, the parent guides. This is the first time that we have had parent guides that are connected to the early childhood learning standards. So let's be clear what that means. It means that we can align what parents are doing with what we're doing in the early childhood classroom. So a parent of a 1-year-old could be working on some of the same skills that we're working on in the classroom. What is the benefit when the adults in the child's life all have the same understanding about what does this child need, what comes next, how can I help? This is an important piece for us. We need to be able to think about how we keep inviting parents to work alongside with us. If we're ever going to get to that middle slide where there's that rich synaptic connections, it's all about inviting the parent in some very real ways. Now, what we know is we can't just hand the parent guides to the family. If you hand the whole thing to them, what we know is that a few of our parents will read them and most of them won't. So once again, we have to think about what's the best things anybody in our county is doing to get this into the hands in a very real way so that our parents will actually use these things. What else could we be doing? So thinking that thing through, starting that dialogue with your members of your community early childhood council is a critical piece. How's this being shared? What are you doing? What are your parents' feedback? What are they finding useful? But remember what we have for the very first time. We have the adults in the child's life could potentially all be working on the same set of skills. That kind of alignment, not only with their later on what they need to know when they get to kindergarten, but that alignment when the child is 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 has great power. Here's something that you may or may not have known. There is information that is available to parents just in time when they need it. For many of our parents, they have sort of information overload. They are sort of like, well, look, there's so much out there. What should I really do? There are free resources that parents can have and that you can sign parents up for that come as the child is 1 month of age, 2 months of age, 3 months of age. And this is information across all the domains: health, language, motor activities, all with suggestions about things that they could be doing. This gives them a chance to sort of say, okay, wait a minute. All right, this is what I need to know. It. When you have information, when you need to know it, you're much more likely, if it's concise, it's coming just at the time when my child is reaching that age, this is something that many of our parents would find very, very helpful. And so, again, it's a no-cost way. There are 2 examples of it. One is Born Learning, and that's put out by the Born Learning folks. And the other one is the Parent Express. And you can see on this slide where you can go to access either of those. The Parent Express is put out by the University of Kentucky, and so it's always up to date. It's beautiful stuff. And it's very comprehensive, and it's done in about a 3 or 4 page format for the child. And I think many of your parents would find this very, very interesting. One of the things that Children Inc. did was it partnered with the local hospital where most of our children were being born, local school district, because school districts want to have an ongoing relationship with parents long before the child arrives there. And we made sure that every child who was born at that hospital signed up for it, And so it came in automatically on the right month and the right date for the child. Another way it could be done quite simply is that when a child is enrolled at your center, if they're at 36 months or 38 months or 39 months, you could just enroll them at that point in this, and they would be getting this every couple of months. So I would suggest, if you can, again, this is a free resource, and again, it's one of those resources that could be there for families who we are finding it hard to reach. They're not anywhere that we know of. Getting this kind of information, say through the hospital, to families that aren't necessarily in any of our programs, would be a very powerful way to kind of change what we need to change if parents are going to be more effective. The last one is one that I think you've all heard of. It's the 30 million word gap. And you're all aware that Hart and Risley started to do this research with graduate students back around 1995. And you know that this is problematic because, again, school is based upon language development. So children who hear fewer words, hear words in shorter sentences, are at a huge disadvantage when they enter kindergarten. They lack the vocabulary, they lack the ability to put words together. But if you will also remember, the other thing that they lack is that part of the brain that learns language was ready to grow between roughly 6 months and 42, 48 months. So the question comes up, it's not just that they don't have that language when they arrive at kindergarten. Their capacity to learn language has also been limited. So what can we do about this? Because many of us know that many of the children that we're trying to reach most effectively are children who score not very well in both language and cognitive development. Historically, on the Regans, much of what our lowest scores are typically in both the language and the cognitive areas. So here's something that, again, is low cost, no cost. A researcher named Grover Whitehurst, back around 2000, developed a more effective way to read to children that did not require having very high literacy skills. In other words, he developed it for families who were not good readers. How do they help their children become good readers? So it's a very simple thing. I'm hoping that you already know what this is. It is a very simple way to teach reading. So you have a child and you have the adult, and they're looking at a child's picture book. This method is very simple. The adult points to something in the book, asks the question, what is that? Waits 5 seconds for the child to give the answer, and if the child knows the answer, then the adult expands on the child's answer. So even if you are not able to read, and you, the adult, point to a picture and say, what is that? And let's say it's a horse, and the child doesn't know what it is, the adult would say, it's a horse. If a day later they're looking at the same picture book, and the adult says, what is it? And the child says, it's a horse, the adult expands on the child's answer. That's right, it's a brown horse, or it's a black horse. And so every time the child responds to the question, the adult always adds a few more words. Pretty soon, it's a black horse eating green grass, and black horse eating green grass, and he's standing there next to his mama. Being able to teach the parents to do that is a very simple skill set. Getting the parents to do it again and again and again is the critical piece here. Now, obviously, we want our staff to do the same kind of shared reading because, in fact, it's a much more powerful way. It involves the child in an active learning, and therefore it's more powerful than just having the child sitting there as a passive listener to the story. But once the parent understands how to do this, it is no longer just something that you do with books. A parent and a child walking along the street, the parent could ask the child the question, point to something and say, what is that? And let's suppose the child knows that that's a tree, and the child says, a tree. And the parent would then expand on it and say, that's right, it's a tree with many branches and the leaves are all green. And so it's a strategy of asking a question, pausing, building on the child's language, and what the research says is it leads to a child much more ready to read, and of course it's building the synaptic connections that the child desperately needs. So here's where you can order it. You might need to buy one of these. Once you've bought one, you can make all the copies that you need for your entire community early childhood council. So it may cost $100, $125 first time to get the book and to get the CD. Once you have it, you can make as many copies as you want. This is a very powerful intervention for our children. We need to be deeply concerned about the fact that many of our children are arriving at kindergarten not ready, and we should be deeply concerned that they are particularly not ready in both language and concepts. So where are we? This is a relatively short webinar. There's a couple things that I would like to just really emphasize. The brain slides are motivational. We need to make sure that all of our staff know them, which means we can't just give it to them once. We need to make sure that all our families know that. Children who have more effective families, who have more committed teachers, and ultimately will have more resources, because over time decision makers will know this research better and better, so that over time we can expect that policy will catch up to what we now know about the early development of children. Many of us have been saying for many, many years, the early years are foundational. But this brain research changes it. So as you share this with more and more people within your community, not just your families, not just with your staff, hopefully again and again with the people who make decisions about resources, as they come to understand this, we should see a field that has a great deal more resources to do the essential work that we're doing. Secondly, what we're really hoping for our parents is that they will do a few things different or better. We don't need to expect that they're going to do everything. So if we can take any part of what you've seen in this presentation, whether it's the kindergarten readiness, the parent guides, the born learning, any of those things that help them become more effective, we need to understand has a huge impact on the outcome of that child's life. So we need to get started. There will be time. We will be working on helping families become more and more effective for years. But there's huge payoffs even now as we start with very simple things. The other thing that I would like you to take away from this is that there's a need to start to figure out what are the best things that your various members are doing. How can you learn from each other? There are cool things that everybody does, and somehow, sometimes, we don't seem to share them very well between our programs. That needs to change. We all are going to help Kentucky's children if we work together. So what are the best practices? We have to ask, who's using the parent guides well, for example? Who's getting the brain slides out effectively? And we need to learn what each other is doing, and we need to share that. The last thing I'd like to sort of say is this. I'm hoping that all of you know that families are key. That helping families be effective really is our job. sometimes people say, well, look, caring for children is my job, or helping children learn is my job. We have to kind of come to a new understanding in our field that says, look, if we're going to be effective, if we're going to have what that slide in the middle showed of all of that rich synaptic connections, we have got to partner effectively with families. And again, I can't emphasize enough that we mean all families. I have had staff at Children Inc. tell me over the years again and again, wow, I'm really good with most of my families. But there are some families who I think are doing a bad job, or who aren't what I would, the kids come to school late, dirty, whatever. They don't come to any of the events, and on and on and on. And the message always back is those are the families we most need to partner with. And we cannot partner unless we respect. There's no way, if you disrespect someone, that somehow or another they won't read that message. And so again and again, we're going to have to help all of our staffs learn to find the good in every one of our parents, particularly the parent who is most unlike themselves, whom they would sort of have a tendency, our staff would have a tendency to believe is perhaps not as effective as they would hope for the child. We have got to learn how to partner with all of them. We will be successful if we partner with families. We cannot be successful for so many of our children if we don't. So what I'm hoping is that we can recommit. It's not easy. It doesn't get done all at once. We got to start. Getting a start makes a difference, but we have to start. And we've got to start together, and we have to learn from one another. So I want to thank you for what you're doing. I want to thank you for the good that you're doing. It is really amazing that we are given the opportunity to make such a huge difference in the lives of children, because at this point, it's like we are giving them the tools for the rest of their lives. So I'd like to go ahead and stop here and answer any questions that we might have.
If you just want to hit *6 on your phone if you're muted, if you have a question for Rick, or feel free to type it in the chat box there to the left-hand side of your screen. Rick, I don't know if you've had a chance to glance over at the chat box, but there's some really great examples of what CECCs are doing using the parent guides, using the kindergarten readiness definition to engage their communities. For example, in Meade, and I think it was Meade County. In Meade County, they conducted parent education workshops in conjunction with the library story time. And each quarter, they focused on one specific domain of the kindergarten readiness definition. So I was really excited to see that. I think that especially partnering with your local libraries throughout the summer is a great way to do that. And in Lewis County, it's one of our brand new CECCs this year. They're going to be printing out the flyers and putting them in Happy Meals to get them in hands of families that, stop by to get those Happy Meals for their kids. So we've got some really great examples. Does anybody else have any examples they might want to share over the phone? Again, just hit *6 to unmute yourself. Looks like in Callaway County, the school readiness domains were broken down into interactive action stations for families to go through so they can try to understand them better at our school readiness programs. I know a lot of CECCs do those at their kindergarten transition events that they do every fall, which is also very, very exciting. So we've got a lot of folks using those. And Rick, I would like to say those are some really great resources that I didn't know about, especially that one, the Parent Express with the cooperative extension. Have you guys used that much in the Children's Inc. Work that you guys are doing up there?
We have, and we've also used the Born Learning, and we find that the parents really respond well, because parents who are overwhelmed don't have a lot of time to read everything that's coming out about early childhood. But if they can get information when they need it that's specific to the age of their child, it helps them because it's just so much simpler. It's all in one place. So we found that parents really respond well to this. Again, I love the idea of partnering with the libraries. It's just such a cool thing. But what we find is that the more we share the brain research, the more other partners come from places that we wouldn't expect. We find that all of a sudden the police department wants to speak up on the importance of early childhood. We find that businesses are starting to say, we get this thing. We really want all of our children to get off to a good start. So I would almost go so far as to say that if we really want all of Kentucky's children to arrive at school ready to do well, first of all, it's got to be with parents. But this brain research has changed the entire landscape for us. And so as we get this out at the local level to our staff and to the schools and to decision makers and to businesses, all of a sudden we'll find that we have partners that we didn't know. I mean, a lot of what we have would be great if it were being given out by some of the local businesses. I mean, so I think that as we share what we now know about the development of young children, we will find that we have more people who want to support us and want to help us be successful. And we'll go from sort of like, oh yeah, why does kindergarten readiness matter, to, my God, we got to get more of our kids ready. It builds an urgency.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. I absolutely agree with that. And I know that we've been working on our level, on the statewide level, to reach out to the business folks and get them to come to some of our events and stuff like that. And I know some CECCs are doing the same thing, because Rick, as you've said, I think that folks are finally starting to understand how important early childhood is, and how important making sure that those synapses are connected long before they get to high school, or it'll be trouble for them there. So, yeah, I think that's absolutely true.
So I guess what I'm hoping is that if the CECs would take one or two things out from this webinar. When I look at it, there are so many places to start, but I really think that getting the brain research into the hands of families and to staff is a critical piece. And I believe that this whole shared reading thing is such a simple and powerful answer to how do we help children whose families are not highly literate become highly literate. I think that those are two huge game changers for all of our children. And so I'm hoping that we can figure out many, many ways to keep bringing this back in front of the community early childhood councils.
Well, Rick, I would, just to take a brief second and give you a little bit of a pat on the back, I want to thank you on behalf of our office and CECCs across the state for your leadership as chair of the Early Childhood Advisory Council, and really getting, really on a statewide level, getting us focused on making sure that families and parents understand that, and being instrumental in creating the definition, making the standards a little bit more understandable, and making those parent guides easier for parents to use. So thank you so much for all your hard work and making sure that we were all on the same page on this.
Well, a great many people have put a great deal of work into this, and the key now is to get it into the hands of our families in a way that they find useful. And I believe that there's a lot of great practices out there by many of the early childhood providers, and we just need to figure out how to find out what those practices are and how to share them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So again, thank you so much, Rick, and thanks everybody for taking a few minutes this afternoon to learn a little bit more about some of the nationwide things that are being used in the state. I do want to just really quickly give everybody kind of an update on what we're looking at for the upcoming couple months. Our next webinar is going to be focused on oral health and early childhood. It's going to be with Lacey McNary from Kentucky Youth Advocates. I would encourage everyone to really try to make that if you can. There may be some possibility of a little bit of grant money coming to the state, particularly for oral health. So I would love it if everybody could kind of participate in that to learn a little bit more about oral health and how we might be able to expand that. It's going to be on August 14th at 2 p.m. As always, our webinars are the second Thursday of the month at 2, so this one's going to be on the 14th, which is going to be the day before those annual reports are due. I know everybody's itching to get their hands on those annual reports and get those completed and back into us. We are putting the final touches on the annual reports, and hopefully we'll have those out to everybody either tomorrow afternoon or on Monday. Just want to make sure we're getting all the right information. The third thing that I wanted to make sure that everybody knew is that the first Race to the Top Born Learning Academies have been announced this year, so we were really excited if you were able to attend the Ready Kids Conference. We did a rather large section at the very beginning with those first dollars that are being spent with the Race to the Top. If you are not working, if you're one of the counties that received funding for that, definitely reach out to your local Frisky to make sure that the CECC is involved as we possibly can in making sure that those are successful, whether it's helping recruit families, maybe doing a potluck dinner or something like that for the Born Learning Academies to make sure that those are successful. Just to give you a brief snapshot of what we're looking at for next year's Ready Kids Conference, yes, we are already talking about that. We're hoping to have the dates of that released relatively soon so that folks can get that on their calendars for next summer, so definitely be watching out for that. And always keep an eye out for our CECC newsletter. Hopefully we're going to be sending that one out next week as well, where we'll talk a little bit more about upcoming events. We'll have, you guys know we have the CECC Spotlight every month we send those out. I do have a question over in the chat box. Will we be able to get a copy of this PowerPoint? Absolutely. If you just want to shoot me an email, it's also located on our website under Communities, and then if you go to the Resources tab under Communities, it should be located right there at the bottom of that page. So that's just going to be the PowerPoint that Rick used today, and then we will have our webinar up on YouTube pretty quickly. So hopefully everybody will get a chance to take a look at that. And again, I want to thank Rick for joining us this afternoon. I want to thank everybody who was able to join us to talk a little bit more about this afternoon as well. So if you guys have any questions about anything, as you know, you can always just give me a shout. I'll be around. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye-bye.